Hey guys, it's Sarah from Misadventure Pants here for your live chat. Yay! I'm sorry, I'm looking incredibly natural right now with my flat hair and no makeup. It's like 99 degrees here in Denver, so I've kind of been in and out of the pool all day, as you can see. It's the only way to keep cool because even the air conditioning is barely working. Hope you guys are doing good, having a great week. Oh. Something just flashed up on my computer. How funny. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is a topic. You guys know I'm going to Mount Rainier in July to climb. So I've been really looking at my search and rescue insurance and trying to figure out like what makes sense. And then as I was researching all of this and finding out all the crazy complexities of it, I'm like, this would be a great topic for a live chat because I know this is something, at least here in Colorado and probably in many other parts of the world, people are very curious about. Like if I have an emergency in the wilderness, I get lost, I get hurt, someone needs to come and rescue me, how do I pay for it? So let's talk about that today. And we'll just start with the question, what is search and rescue, or SAR sometimes? People use the acronym. So basically it is a service that assists lost and injured hikers, skiers, boaters, people who are out in the wilderness and run into trouble. Usually it's attached to some sort of land management agency. For example, National Park Service has its own search and rescue that operates through all the national parks. Coast Guard actually runs a search and rescue that is maritime and boaters and things close to the coast. But in most places, for example, here in Colorado, search and rescue is run by your county, and most of the people that are participating, that are going out on missions to rescue people, they're volunteers, and they are often very dedicated people. They're investing in their own equipment. They're taking time out of their schedules to train, and of course, they can be called in at any time to come and do a mission and rescue somebody. So it's a really cool service they provide for us, and for the most part, in most places in the States, it's all run by volunteers, often with support from maybe local fire services or police or paramedics. It's usually run through the sheriff's department of your county. So if you are going hiking, it's good to know what county you're in and leave that number with someone, because that is the quickest way to get a hold of the people that would come and rescue you if something happens. So who needs search and rescue? You may be saying to yourself, this is something that probably just doesn't happen very often, and I don't know, it's probably different in different places, but here in Colorado, I don't know like a ton of people, but I probably know a dozen people just off the top of my head. I was actually counting before this on my hands, and I ran out of fingers. I know like 12 people that have had search and rescue called in, and 3 of those actually needed a helicopter for a rescue, so it's not uncommon here at all. You just never know. One way to kind of keep a pulse on it, if you go to the forums at 14ers.com, often they will discuss rescues that happen in Colorado and sometimes in other places as well. Sometimes they're really hard on the people that get rescued. They're like, look at what happened to this doofus, but so don't play that game, but in general, it's a really good resource for just kind of seeing how often this happens. Let's see. And there's a statistic, I think the NPS does 2,600 missions a year, most years, and it costs $4 million. It's not cheap to run this, so taxpayers are paying for that. And then if you think about, that's just the national parks. Think of all the accidents that happen outside the national parks. And another thing is, you might think, I'm not a real high-risk person. I don't do like mountaineering or rock climbing or anything crazy. But actually, the biggest group of people that are rescued by search and rescue services are hikers. They're not doing anything technical. They're just out, and maybe they get lost or get trapped in terrain where they can't get out, or maybe something happens, somebody gets hurt and they can't get themselves out. So hikers, males 20 to 29 is actually the biggest group. Make of that what you will. So how much does SAR cost? And historically, there's been an ethic, kind of in the hiking and the SAR communities, that it should be free. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, you don't want anyone to ever avoid calling in help when they need it because they're afraid of getting a bill. And people who have done SAR will tell you the craziest stories about going to rescue hikers that hide from them. Because they're like, oh crap, SAR is here. If they find me, I'm going to like get a $2,000 bill, and that would suck. When in most cases, that's not true, as we'll get to in a minute. And it's also, there's kind of a case to be made that wilderness rescue shouldn't be any different than any other kind of civic service. Like, we rescue people from fires, we rescue people from, car crashes. The police come in and extricate them if they're in a smashed up car, and it's free. No one ever gets a bill for that, even if you were a terrible driver and, the accident was your fault. They'll rescue you for free. So a lot of services still offer SAR for free. Government agencies do. It's always free in the national parks. It's always free from the Coast Guard, from the armed forces. We actually had, it's on 14ers.com, an incident a couple weeks ago where an Army helicopter took someone off of the West Ridge of Quandary, and that's free, I guess. It's a different story if the helicopter's like a medevac or coming from a hospital. We'll talk about that in a minute too, but yeah, armed forces, totally free. And in a lot of localities, a lot of counties, definitely everywhere in Colorado that I know of right now, it's also free. They want you to know it's free. They want you to not be discouraged from calling if you need help. There are, however, some exceptions to that. For example, I mentioned helicopters. It's really expensive to bring in a helicopter, and especially if they have to bring in a medevac or something like that that's not associated with the federal government. Sometimes the person who's rescued can be responsible for the bill, so that's something to keep in mind. And I hear different figures for how much it costs, but kind of the most reliable thing I've heard for someone that actually worked for medevac is it can be up to $25,000, so it's definitely not talking about trivial costs if you were to have to be rescued by a helicopter. This is, so I said, in most localities it's free, and actually this is kind of an interesting area I think hikers should watch, because the trend is towards putting more responsibility on hikers for rescues, and I mean that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is really expensive, and essentially taxpayers are paying for it. There's also a question, and budgets are decreasing. We hear about budgets to national parks and land management agencies shrinking, especially with our current administration, lovely administration. And that is going to put the squeeze on SAR and make it harder for them to operate. Another thing that's happening is more people are hiking, so hence more people need to be rescued, and that's great, but that also does kind of put more strain on our resources. They say technology is having an effect. People using their smartphones and thinking this is an insurance policy, this device I can just call help if I need, call someone if I need help. And anyone that's ever hiked anywhere near Denver knows, once you get to Evergreen, your service just completely sucks. I mean, you're barely, not even in the mountains yet, and it's gone. So you can't really rely on devices. And there's also kind of a thought about personal responsibility that people, a lot of these rescues are people that are going into the wilderness. They're not properly trained. They're not properly equipped. Sometimes they're breaking rules, going places they shouldn't be. And should they, have to bear some responsibility for that, which, is just kind of a question I won't touch, but a question that gets brought up a lot in this argument. So some states actually have, I think this is interesting, moved to, they've passed bills in the past couple of years that allow search and rescue services to bill the people they rescue for the cost of the rescue. So states that have done that are New Hampshire. They've actually sent bills to people. Utah has a law like this. There are only 2 counties in Utah, last time I checked, that were actively enforcing this and billing people, but I think the trend is going to be more towards seeing this in more places. So, as a hiker, I think this is something we should all kind of keep an eye on. I think that's interesting to note is if you look at the rest of the world, it's all over the map, whether it's free or pay. For example, in New Zealand, it's always free. They are all volunteer, and they want you to call if there's a problem. And in Europe, it's actually always been all pay. Europeans who go out and hike in the Alps understand that if something happens, they're going to be responsible for the cost of their own rescue. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. And actually, that means good things for us. But before we get there, if you're traveling, it's good to kind of look at what's going on. If you're going to a different state or even a different country, kind of how they approach this. So this kind of raises the question, even in states that are, quote unquote free, you could still have things in extenuating circumstances like a helicopter rescue. Do you need search and rescue insurance, and where can you get it? So I'll tell you some considerations, and then I'll tell you what I do here in Colorado, because I do have search and rescue insurance. I have 2 of them, actually, but we'll get there in a minute. So search and rescue insurance, obviously, it's a great idea in places like Utah, New Hampshire, or states where you could be responsible for the cost of your rescue. And both of those states that I mentioned, Utah and New Hampshire, actually sell insurance policies that are very inexpensive. They're under $40. You get a little SAR insurance card and off you go. If search and rescue has to come and rescue you, you're off the hook, as you've paid into their fund. It's a little confusing because some other states, including Colorado, where I'm at, have voluntary cards. If you live in Colorado, you've probably seen the CORSAR card. Basically, you can buy it, and it's a donation and raises awareness about search and rescue. Colorado Search and Rescue will come and get you, at least, right now, they will come and get you, and they will not bill you, whether or not you have a CORSAR card. So, but get a CORSAR card, because it's really good to give back, and definitely our search and rescue, they need money. They operate at a loss very often. So obviously there's states where you're going to want to have it for sure, the search and rescue insurance. And even if your area doesn't charge, some insurance is a good idea. Say you have to get picked up by a helicopter, that could potentially be very expensive. A few words about helicopters. I actually got to see a presentation by the medevac chopper crew from Summit County, and that was super interesting. And they talked about some of the finances of it, and they were, and I think a lot of localities are like this. They talked about, technically the person who is rescued is, responsible for the bill, but they don't collect aggressively. They won't come after you for $25,000 just aggressively and then take your house and, make you go bankrupt just because you had to get medevaced in their helicopter. They give a lot of charity care out, again, operating at a loss, does a lot of fundraising, and is supported by a lot of taxpayer money. So, if you have a way to cover your rescue, obviously it's really good and will keep that resource around. So I think that's one reason to get insurance, even if you're not likely to get, stuck with the whole bill. And who knows, maybe you will. They don't promise that they won't come after you, but they say their policy is to not be super aggressive about it. Other things to think about, in a medical emergency, for helicopters in particular, for a medevac situation, you might be covered by your health insurance. I know someone that actually was hit by a rock in the head and had a pretty bad concussion and had to be medevaced out of the San Juans, and the health insurance company treated it like an ambulance, like any other sort of transportation for medical. So after his deductible, he didn't have to pay anything for the helicopter, and the helicopter company did get reimbursed, which was great. And obviously not all situations where you're going to get a helicopter are going to be medical, which it's good to have something in place just in case you're in a situation like that. So which brings us to what kind of insurance should you buy and how do you decide? So some shopping tips. when you're picking a search and rescue policy, it's really important to read the fine print. These things are full of ridiculous exclusions. As I've kind of realized through this whole process of getting ready for Mount Rainier, they may not cover you if you're close to home, like even within 100 miles. They may not cover you unless you actually spend a night in a hospital. They may not cover expeditions, whatever that means. There's all kinds of just crazy exclusions that can happen. There's also some, I really hate this one in particular, there's some insurance, including some rather popular ones, that make you actually call their number to get help. And I find that just ridiculous. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've broken my leg and, I'm just going to call 911. I don't know that I'm going to dig my number out of your backpack. Maybe, hopefully I would have it programmed in my phone, but who knows, right? Or maybe, like, I'm unconscious and my friend calls search and rescue for me and they bring in a helicopter. Like, then I'm on the hook, even though I have this ridiculous insurance. So I'm not a big fan of those either. Let's see. Yeah. So, and certain activity exclusions are, like a lot of, even ones that are offered through, for example, the American Alpine Club. You might have to get a rider in order to do some kinds of adventure sports or to go hiking up above a certain elevation. It's very common that there's an elevation where they won't cover above that. So just check the fine prints, check for exclusions, and be really sure what you're getting. There's a lot of stories about, unfortunately, search and rescue insurance being a bit squirrely when people go to claim, if you Google on the internet. So what should you buy? I'll make a couple recommendations. I've used a couple of these, and these are also things that I personally use. I haven't used all of them. So one is, I think it's really important if you're going out in the wilderness a lot to have some sort of beacon device, and usually those come with search and rescue insurance. So in my case, I have a Spot, which is a pretty basic one. If there's an emergency, I can just hit a button, and it calls a emergency response service called GEOS that will, in theory, coordinate a rescue and come out to find me, and they can see my exact location from this device. They will only come if I summon them through the device. If I call 911, I can't later go and claim on my GEOS insurance. So it is a bit limited, but for places where you don't have cell phone service, I think it's a great thing to have. There's also the kind of a limitation of the Spot, and I've written a bit about this on the blog, is that it only goes one way. I can't actually talk to GEOS and tell them what's going on, or make sure that they actually responded. It seems like they have a really good track record for responding, but if you want a little bit of extra reassurance, there's actually a device called the DeLorme InReach that actually allows you to text back and forth and call different numbers. It's a two-way communication device. It's more expensive. It's about twice as expensive as the Spot, both to buy the device and then to buy the yearly plan that you use as your search and rescue insurance. But, might be worth it. It's probably an extra margin of safety and reassurance. So if that's in your budget, definitely something to look into. And I feel like there's just all kinds of room for things to go wrong with that particular scenario. Because, for example, maybe I do have cell service somewhere and I want to call 911 just because I can talk to them. I'll know that they're coming. It just, it may be a little bit easier than working with GEOS. So the insurance that I use for that, there's actually if you join this is going to sound ridiculous, but this is totally like what seems to work from my research. You join the Austrian Alpine Club, like over in Europe, and you get the same policy that the Europeans have, which is a worldwide $30,000 search and rescue policy. And $30,000 isn't a ton of money, but, it's probably going to pay for like a helicopter ride and, most things that would happen to you, at least in the U.S. And that insurance is pretty broad. It does have an altitude limitation, I think. You have to get a rider if you're going to take it above, I want to say like 6,000 meters, which is pretty big. Um, but and the cool thing is it only costs like 50 Great Britain, I don't know what this is in dollars, but 50 Great Britain pounds a year, which I think is amazing. So I've never actually claimed on this insurance. I think you really find out like how good your insurance is. It's hard to know until you actually claim on it. But like it has a reputation for being a lot less like squirrely and nitpicky than some of these other services. It doesn't have a lot of exclusions, and they do tend to pay people's claims without a ton of hassle, according to people that have actually had to make claims through them. So Austrian Alpine Club, who knew? That's kind of my backup insurance for just about everything. And then finally, if you're going to go on a big trip, if you're going to be hiking, like maybe to Everest Base Camp or somewhere that's up really high, where you might have trouble with exclusions that don't go above a certain elevation, you probably need some extra insurance. So two that are very reputable. There's one, you can actually put a rider on your Austrian Alpine Club policy that will allow you to go up above 6,000 meters. I think that's their cutoff for elevation. I hope that's right. Double check that. But yeah, you have to go to a website and fill out like forms in German, and it's a lot of fun, but yeah, you can totally do it. It's supposed to be really good insurance. And another option that's pretty affordable and, insures expeditions all over the world to K2, to the Himalayas, is called World Nomads. And if you get the World Nomads Explorer level plan, that is a really good one for just about like anything you can do that's high adventure. It covers lots of adventure sports, and then just also if you want to go trekking up at higher elevations. And it's very experienced with working with all kinds of adventurous type things that people do, so definitely check it out. So those are my 3 recommendations. If you guys have additional recommendations, services you've used that have worked really well, feel free to throw them in the comments. I mean, I'm always looking to learn more. I think these things are just crazy making. They're so complicated. So the last thing I kind of want to leave you guys with, the last thought on SAR, is be a good citizen when you're a hiker. Definitely if you need SAR, call it. But, also, don't call it. Make sure you really need it before you put a call in. You definitely don't want to call because you have a hangnail or the toe fell off your boots, or if you can possibly get yourself out safely, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable, it's a good thing to do, because those people that do SAR, they take time away, they risk their lives for your life, and you certainly only want to use them when you really, really need them. But do use them when you need them. Don't be afraid to call. I mean, that's the message I think that they would tell you. And also, make sure that you support your local SAR. Most SAR units here in Colorado have fundraisers. They accept donations. You can go. Some put on like 5K races you can go and run, or you can volunteer at the race. You can become, even if you don't want to be like go out and rescue people. I have a friend, she's like an associate SAR member, meaning she volunteers and kind of is in a support role and helps them out, and it's really a cool thing to do. So anything you can do to support search and rescue, who knows, you might need it one day. So yeah, that's my very long talk about SAR. I was like, this will be a short one, but it never is with me, apparently. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching, and yeah, have a wonderful weekend. It looks like it's gonna be a good one, hot one. So be careful. Don't do anything where you need SAR, and have lots of fun. Okay, bye.